DB, I was actually thinking about buying cars, weirdly enough, when we were talking with Tim, because
I need one.
I've gone to,
Go find me one.
you just tell me what you want. We'll go find one.
I want to. I want to get out of the SVU world.
You want to go back in?
SUV world.
I would say, I think you live in the SVU world with
I
your
do.
serial killer tendencies. But,
No, it's a good show
I
though.
mean, you're spinning a knife in your hand while you say that. It's a little less convincing.
It's a butter. It's a butter knife.
You got
I
rubber
can't even.
gloves.
I can't even do much with
You got
this.
rubber gloves and you're spinning a knife in your hand. Like you're not helping yourself out any, man.
I don't know why the butter knife was over here. I didn't do
Should
it.
I pick that up when I set stuff up? I
Maybe.
mean, it was just sitting there. I was like, I don't know what this is doing here. I'm not even touching it.
But so I'm thinking about we're talking about value versus available funds, right? Because I like to lease cars, right? That's my typical go-to, and I go in and I have an idea of what I want to pay for whatever like I'll go into a dealership and there'll be like 3 or 4 different models I'm looking at, right?
Mm.
And I'll go in, I'll be like, okay, I'm looking at this model for around this monthly price. And they'll be like, oh, we can't really get you there on this one, but on this other vehicle, we can get you to that number. And I was like, no. That vehicle is not worth that number to me.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm going in, just because my budget is X does not mean I'm willing to pay X for whatever you have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's say you go in and your budget on a car is $400 a month or whatever, pick a number, right? And they're like, I can't get you to 400 on this SUV that you want, but I can get you to 400 on this minivan. It's like, well, first of all, I don't need a minivan. That's not a need for me. Number 2, I don't value the minivan at the same number that I value the SUV. So just because I can pay 400 doesn't mean I'm going to pay 400.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a talk about auto loans. It's a talk about running backs. Just so we're all aware.
Yeah.
You get where I'm going here?
I do.
Like budget and what you're willing to pay are not always the same thing.
Yeah. I completely get that scenario. I just, for me, and I'll move on. I always worry about not necessarily buyer's remorse as much as the entity that was bought. Because sometimes at such a young age, we're captivated by the wrong things, but it's just part of the maturation process. You just hope that the lesson learned, you can recover from in enough time.
Sure.
So
and
that's kind of the way I look at it.
And you could make the argument that that was one of the fatal flaws of the Scott Frost era, is that they compromised on some things, had some buyer's remorse, and weren't able to recover.
Yeah. And a guy that was well aware that
it happened.
That it happened.
I think that's probably the thing I was most surprised about that you told me about Frost.
That he told me that?
That he was aware that it happened.
Yeah.
He was aware of the decision that he made, and that he was aware that it backfired, and that he was aware
of by halfway through year 2, he's like,
I messed that up.
He's like, look, man, I compromised some things in the recruiting area because I wanted to win so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it.
At that,
and that's the part. See, I don't have any problems with that.
At least he's aware, right?
And who
amongst us hasn't been like, yeah, let's go get it now?
And I wish, and I'm throwing myself into this. Sometimes real time when something is spiraling, that I just say, hey, this is spiraling.
Yeah.
Being
aware of it spiraling is half the battle, right? Because
I never.
The earlier you're aware of it, the more likely you are to save it.
Yeah.
Right.
The ability to, because I always think critical thinking boils down to more like, okay, what now? Not what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what now?
Right.
Like this has happened.
Yeah. Now what?
Now what?
Now, sometimes it's useful to understand why this happened to get out of it.
Typically post, but yes.
But sometimes in the moment it can be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason sometimes we'll be like, okay, can we get a root cause here so I know how to get out of this? But you're right. Dwelling on how you got there, typically not the best way to get out.
Yeah.
Right? So that to me is, but the best way to get out of it is to not get it in the first place. Right? It's to not compromise what you're about for a running back. And, let me ask you about this, because obviously a lot of this we're talking about Marty Brown, but it's sort of a larger conversation about how Nebraska recruits and how they operate.
The running back position.
Yeah, the running back position and how Nebraska operates in general, right?
Hey, can I ask you something real quick?
Yeah.
Are you a 5 or 6 scholarship guy in running backs?
Honestly, I think I'm okay with 5.
Okay.
I feel fine with 5. Like, I don't look at Nebraska's room this year. I wish one of them wasn't a true freshman out of Booth or Parker. I wish one of them had a year in the program, but I'm fine with the number. I don't look at this. I look and I go, okay, I've got Emmett, I've got Mackay, I've got Quentin Ives, I got Connor Booth, I got Jamarian Parker. I like my options there. I wish one of the 2 true freshmen was a year older. That's it. And I'm not going to split hairs over that, but I'm fine with 5. What about you?
I go back and forth. If I'm talking to Dan Jackson, I'll say 5. If I'm talking to me, I'll say 6. If I'm talking to
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the right answer is. I start with health, but that's too easy because you can't peg
predict it anywhere.
I think I lean towards 5.
Yeah. You kind of run into this at a few different spots, but when I get to 6, I start to think somebody's going to be unhappy here.
Yeah.
There is a diminishing returns in number of bodies in the room. And we'll talk about this at some point. We don't have to right now, but that's one of the things I'm starting to look at with Creighton's basketball roster, right? I'm like, somebody's going to be unhappy with their minutes there. There's too many good guys that are capable to make everybody happy with the amount of minutes they're playing. So that's the thing that I'm starting to look at and starting to think about. I think running backs, it's a real thing, right? It's probably I would say it's the most corollary to basketball in the sense of like, hey, I got to get my touches the same way like I got to get my minutes. If you're talking to a good basketball player and he's playing less than 15 minutes a game, he's probably not going to be happy. If you're talking to a good running back and he's not getting 8, 10, 12 touches a game at least, probably not going to be happy.
I hope you're right with 8.
Who do you want to get to 8?
Well, any of whomever the third guy is, 8 would be great.
So let's say it's
8 would be great.
Emmett, Mackay, and Quentin in some order for Mackay and Quentin. I think they're going to be situationally different, so I don't know that they're going to overlap a ton in terms of what they would do.
Yeah.
So you would like to see Emmett. Let's include receptions here.
Let's not, for the sake of the discussion.
Okay. So how many carries are you looking at for Emmett? 16?
18.
18? Okay. So number 2 guy, you want 12?
10 to 12.
And then at least 8 for the third guy.
Yep.
So we're talking 38 carries a game?
Yeah. Basically.
How many plays you want to run? 75?
4.
So we're just over 50-50.
Correct.
So 52-48 run pass?
That's how I am.
It's kind of in the neighborhood?
I didn't just pick those numbers willy-nilly.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to break it down.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure I got my math right.
Yeah.
So you're talking 38 carries, 36 pass attempts?
Yeah, because I'm just looking at this offensive line. And talking to Coach Barthel so much over the last couple of weeks, I know how he feels. I've always known how Coach Raiola feels.
Yeah.
And I think I understand what Coach Holgerson wants to do. That took me some time because
we have an idea of who we thought Coach Holgerson was.
Not so much that.
Okay.
As much as
that's what it is for me.
Well, for me, I knew he had to see what he had.
Sure.
So I'm not basing this on his history
because
I was never one of those. Well, he's an air raid.
No, but
I knew that from the jump.
He's very adaptable.
Yes. Yeah.
So if he's got a certain skill set on his team, he'll adapt.
He can do that. So I had to give him time to see with what he was working with. Now, the only consensus I've gathered, and it was really cool to hear Coach Barthel talk about this, is he loves the offensive line. Like one of the big things that I think he's talking to these running backs about is look what we're capable of doing up front. This is different since I've been here. I've never heard him talk like that.
Yeah.
I've never heard the coaching staff, almost to a man on the offensive side of the ball, go out of their way to talk about the offensive line. They've done it all spring.
Yeah.
I pit that against the very first visual that I had leaving spring practice.
Sure. Yeah.
What was the famous call? Oh, yeah. What was the famous text?
You're like, I think the offensive line is really good.
Yeah, and I didn't want to say that.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Because you're like, I don't – you didn't couch it, but you put context where you go, I don't want to be overreacting, but
yeah,
I think the offensive
line. And I've done
really
this long enough to know, like, what I'm pitting against my own personal feelings.
Sure. And what it's like, hey, good offensive line versus bad defensive line, right?
So, like, having said that, they want to run. I think they want to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I listen to these conversations between a courted running back and a coach get into like their favorite pet plays and how they like to run it. And I told you a little bit of the snippets of Brown asking Coach Rule about their favorite plays and what Coach Rule likes. It's the first time audibly I've heard Coach Rule talk about what he appreciates in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is this uninterrupted? I'm just listening.
Yeah.
I'm trying to walk ahead, but still
keep an ear back.
Because I'm like, fudge. And the only reason, it's not like they don't know that they're talking in front of me. I didn't want to be in the conversation.
Sure.
And I was very, very tempted to interject.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
you gotta clean yourself up a little bit.
I mean, it's in my,
yeah,
it's tailor-made for what I like to talk about.
Yeah.
And so I know what they want to do. And I look at Latovsky. I look at Pritchett. I look at Justin Evans. I look at Spindler. I look at these guys up front, Sledge. Like, these guys are grading hammers. Not to say they can't pass pro, but fudge. If I move Turner Corcoran inside and he plays an interior guy, or I look at Kanak and he's going to play the right tackles if he plays the right tackle spot. How am I playing to these guys' strengths?
Sure.
Go all the way back, and I'm a nerd, so I remember specifically. But what was the first thing that what were the first attributes that Coach Rule talked about with Spindler when he was asked about Rocco's emergence? This is when he took the media by storm with his presence on day one of getting behind the mic. How'd Coach Rule describe him? Didn't fawn over anything in particular, but he did say this early on.
You have to give it to me.
He's a big guy that can move people.
Oh, yeah. Which sounds really simple.
It's the first thing he said.
Yeah.
Big guy that can move people.
Yeah.
If you move people, are you talking about running the ball or throwing the ball?
Usually running the ball.
You're talking about running the ball.
What did Shaver say about Elijah Pritchett?
If he gets his hands on you, it's curtains.
Yeah. Sounds like he's talking about running the ball.
You couldn't see it because it was field level. And I said this to Pritchett real time. The thing that I was I'm just a dork, and I hate the fact that I'm like this. Because nobody ever wants to get in the weeds, so that's why I end up talking to myself.
Okay.
I'm like, he's going to win this tractor pull because he is in frame. What do I mean by in frame?
So he's not going like...
He wasn't side to side. There was no wasted movement. He stayed in here to here, legs. His knees were almost directly under his armpits.
Which were, it's like hips, knees, armpits, shoulders.
I'm like,
all
this
the
is an efficient monster. There is no wasted body movement.
So,
even when the harness snapped, it was choking him. He put one elbow towards the ground and he kept it away from his neck because I think it was choking him, and he stayed in frame.
Yeah.
I'm like, this dude knows where his base is. He knows where his base is.
Because that's what you hear about when people are talking about.
And I'm watching Van Poppel,
Yeah.
who's this big a monster,
Yeah.
but he's kind of sprawling. Because as he got tired, the form
the
got away
started
from
breaking
him.
down a little bit.
And so he was moving as much side to side as much as Pritchett was vertically, gaining ground. But I think that's how they want to block, too. Stay in frame.
Well, so you hear that when you're going, we just went through NFL draft season, right? When people are talking about offensive linemen and be like, he reaches a little bit. He's talking about getting outside his frame, right? Because when you're reaching, you're out of balance. So for an offensive lineman especially, that's great to hear and great to see. But the only reason I knew that is because I watched way too much World's Strongest Man when I was a kid. And they're doing all like the semi-pulls and all that kind of stuff. And you could always tell when the guy started swaying back and forth, you're like, nah, that's not going to be it. He's not going to be the one. It was the guys that can drive straight forward and not waste any motions. Maybe some of those guys should have been offensive linemen.
I know. I know. It's like,
can you imagine like a 6'8", 400-pound Brian Shaw on offensive line?
And I just think they want to run the ball.
Yeah.
And whether it's 51-49 or 50-50 or 52-48.
Yeah.
Okay. But
it'll be in the neighborhood.
There's just too much talk about 4-minute offenses. And so when I asked Tim the question about does it fit kind of with the aura and I think when I was talking to my buddy yesterday, when I asked him kind of what is it, like where'd you get this narrative? and he put it against Nebraska's history.
Mm-hmm.
I think for him, like if he just heard Nebraska talk about the position more, I think and I'm speaking for him in this part, but what I gleaned from it was I think if he hears them speak laudingly about it, it would come across as being treated differently on the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
Is that too linear?
No, it makes sense. I'm just trying to think back, and I think they talk about it better than people are acknowledging.
And that could be the case.
Like, that's my issue.
It was just real time.
Sure.
And he was the only person that really laid it out like that.
So I think there's two things. I do think people don't necessarily hear the same things because we just talked about it, how much they've talked about how they want to run the ball, how much they've talked about how much they like their running back room, and we just sort of don't believe them. And I don't know if it's because there's still this thing where we don't like the running backs coach as much for whatever reason. It seems like there's a segment of the fan base that feels that way. I don't know if it's because the results haven't been what we wanted them to be.
Yeah.
Haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher since a Zigbo, and haven't had the success in the running back room or the sexy recruit in the running back room or whatever to kind of hang our hat on. Because I actually think they talk about running the football pretty glowingly. Like, it seems like a thing they really care about. I think it's maybe they don't talk about individuals in the same way.
Does it match how they approach the recruiting trail?
I think so. You know how many people wanted Jamarion Parker?
No, listen.
You know what I mean? Like,
they were way ahead of the game too.
Yeah, they were super early, and they stuck with him through injury.
And he comes with his own set of degrees of difficulty.
Sure.
That aren't just football related, right? Like, you talk about the holistic approach to taking care of somebody emotionally, lost his
he's been through a lot.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And you're talking real East St. Louis. I'm not talking like Belleville or these suburbs. I'm talking
like East St. Louis.
I'm talking like East St. Louis.
Yeah.
So, like, that's something together different. But, yeah, Nebraska did stay with it.
Mm-hmm. But that's a guy that had options.
Yeah. And building that relationship, I think, helped him.
Yeah.
Now, again, you still got to hold up your end of it once you get here.
Sure.
But, with the recruiting process, I completely agree.
Like, that's a highly sought after guy.
Yeah.
That's a guy that a lot of people wanted that Nebraska landed. So I don't know.
Like, why do I like Mackay? Well, not just his running talents, but
he's good.
It's not. See, it's not that.
But he is.
I talk about a lot about his personality, his temperament.
Yeah.
That matters.
Sure.
Right? You having your best day with other people watching matters. I think that day, like, I think his peoples were there too.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several of them.
Yeah.
If they were all together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a pocket full, right? And I was messing with him about, like, not going home. He's like, I don't travel too much. I'm kind of low maintenance. I'm here. I'm like, ooh, check.
Yeah, I'll say, you like that? You like that?
Check.
Yeah.
Just ornery enough to keep me on my toes.
Low mean-spirited.
Check.
Yeah.
Violent. Check. In football.
Yeah.
Before you. Oh, you like serial killers?
No, I would never say that.
It's a violent runner for a little guy. Check. And here's the other thing is he's so quick to get away from the Philadelphia recruitment because Philly gets all the recruiting love, and he's just from Wilkes, right? It's like nobody recruits us. So I'm claiming where I'm from.
Yeah.
I'm not riding on the coattails of them guys.
Yeah.
Check. Now, I say all that to say not to fawn over Mackay because that's well documented. What I'm saying is
they recruit a certain mentality, and
that's what I'm saying.
They recruit a certain mentality in that group.
That's what I'm saying.
I think a lot,
and their coach has that mentality. Yeah. So sometimes it's not always sexy for everybody in the recruiting world, but the temperament has to fit.
Here's the thing that I think the only thing that will really cure what we're talking about. Nebraska needs a production out of that spot. And I think really when we're talking about the recruiting thing, they need a high-profile recruit at the running back spot to pan out for people to stop talking about it. Yeah. I don't think they actually need that to win because I think there's plenty of under-heralded. It's not like Emmett Johnson is this guy that we were fawning over as a recruit necessarily, not to the degree that I think people are talking about, or Mackay Nelson necessarily was. Those are guys that I think you look at and can be successful, But in order to kind of squash this conversation, you need a high-profile running back recruit to be successful here. Because if you think about it, it's been a very, very long time since a highly sought-after running back recruit has been successful at Nebraska. Because you just talked about Amir. He was an afterthought. Talked about Roy Halluth. He was an afterthought. Rex Burkhead might be the most recent highly sought-after guy that was good here.
And we didn't really get back into loving Rex until Team Jack and as a pro.
Absolutely.
Before we were like, man,
he's not
splitting time?
He's not that. He's not whatever.
I remember.
You know, you got to, I mean, I think it goes all the way back to Marlon Lucky, who was never quite what we wanted him to be.
Yeah, we act like.
Even though he was highly productive.
And I used to say to myself, isn't he better than we, didn't we have a better career than we thought?
He certainly did.
It seems like it.
He really did. I think for a long time, maybe to this day, still holds the reception record at Nebraska.
To this day?
To this day.